My name is Mary, and there's a story I need to share. It's about my family, and though it's not easy to talk about, I hope you will listen. I was married to Richard for 5 years. In the beginning, he was a good man, kind, considerate, and hardworking. He had a son, David, who was 17 when I became his stepmother. At first, David was quiet, and I respected his space, giving him time to adjust. His mother had passed away when he was young, so he lived with us full time. Since Richard's work kept him busy, David and I often spent time alone at home. I tried to support him by preparing his meals and creating a warm, welcoming environment. One day, I casually asked him how school was, and he simply replied, "It was good." It wasn't much, but it was a start. I smiled and reassured him that I was always there if he needed to talk. Over time, he slowly opened up, sharing details about his school and friends. I was happy to see him come out of his shell, and I wanted him to feel safe. One evening, while Richard was away on business, David looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You're a really good person. You've always been kind to me." His words were touching, but something in his tone made me slightly uneasy. I brushed off my concerns, thinking he was just being appreciative. Gradually, his behavior changed. He started spending more time around me, sitting next to me while watching TV, offering to help with housework, or finding reasons to engage with me. I saw it as a bond forming between us, but at times, his lingering glances made me uncomfortable. Still, I convinced myself that he was just grateful for my presence in his life. One night, as we were talking, David mentioned how much he missed his mother. "She was the only one who understood me," he said. I sympathized and told him how proud I was of him. From then on, his attachment to me became more pronounced. He constantly found ways to be near me, offering help with small tasks, and expressing his appreciation more frequently. One day, as I was tidying the living room, David sat beside me and said, "Mary, you do so much for us. Don't you deserve to rest?" I laughed lightly and replied, "There's always work to do around the house." Then he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but something about it made me step back instinctively. "David, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice firm. He hesitated before replying, "I don't see you as just a stepmother anymore." His words sent a chill through me. "David, that's not right. We are family," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "I know, but I can't change how I feel," he admitted, his expression torn. I quickly excused myself and locked my bedroom door, my mind swirling with confusion and concern. That night, I considered telling Richard but decided to wait, hoping this was just a phase of emotional confusion that would pass. From that day forward, I tried to keep my distance, shortening our conversations and avoiding being alone with him. David, however, made several attempts to apologize, saying he never meant to make me uncomfortable. "Please, Mary, I don't want things to be awkward between us," he said one evening. But I couldn't bring myself to respond, so I left the room. One evening, Richard was home for dinner, and I felt a sense of relief. David was quiet throughout the meal, but I could feel the weight of his presence. After dinner, I stayed in the kitchen cleaning up when David approached me again. "Mary," he said softly. I ignored him, continuing to wash the dishes. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said before." I turned around and said firmly, "David, I don't want to talk about this. You need to focus on moving forward." He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. "I don't know how to stop feeling this way," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. For the first time, I saw the distress in his eyes. He was struggling, not out of malice but confusion. I took a deep breath. "You have your whole life ahead of you. You need to focus on your future." He nodded but didn't say anything. Then he walked out, leaving me standing there, heart heavy. A few days later, Richard left for another business trip. That evening, David knocked on my bedroom door. "Mary, can I talk to you?" I hesitated before replying, "David, I need to rest." He was silent for a moment, then slowly opened the door and stepped inside. "I just don't want to make things difficult for you. I know I need to move on, but I don't know how." His voice was filled with sadness, and for the first time, I saw a lost teenager rather than an uncomfortable situation. "You have to find a way," I said gently but firmly. "We both do." He sighed, nodding slightly. Maybe I don't need to say anything more. But I still think about you a lot, Mary. With that, he left, closing the door behind him. I sat on my bed feeling emotionally drained. That night, I lay awake, questions racing through my mind. Should I tell Richard? What would happen to our family? How could we all move forward from this? The next afternoon, Richard came home early from work. There was tension in the air, but I forced a smile, trying to maintain normalcy. As I made coffee in the kitchen, Richard sat in the living room, watching TV. After a few minutes, he called out, "Mary, is something wrong?" I froze for a moment before forcing a reply. "No, everything's fine." But my voice lacked conviction. Richard gave me a searching look but didn't press further. The weight of my secret felt heavier than ever. I glanced at David, who sat quietly, his expression unreadable. At that moment, I knew things couldn't continue like this. One way or another, I had to find a way to bring closure to this situation, for David, for Richard, and for myself.